I'm going to assume if you've clicked on this video, you already know what this device is. But just in case you don't, this is the Razer Edge, a handheld Android gaming device by none other than, you guessed it, Razer. And in today's video, I'm going to tell you guys whether this thing is worth its price tag and if you should bother considering it at all. So the Razer Edge comes in two different flavors, a Wi-Fi version and a 5G version that at the time of recording this video was exclusively only sold by Verizon Wireless, at least here in the United States. Oh, and the Wi-Fi version retails for $399, while the 5G version retails for $599. Now, both of these two devices pretty much have the exact same specifications, except for a small discrepancy when it comes to their memory. So they're both powered by the Qualcomm Snapdragon G3X Gen 1 SoC. They both have a 6.8-inch Full HD Plus 2400 by 1080 AMOLED display. They both have got LPDDR5 memory, with the 5G version sporting 8GB of LPDDR5, while the Wi-Fi version only has 6GB of LPDDR5. They both have got 128GB of internal storage and do support microSD cards up to 2TB, and they both do have a 5000 milliamp hour battery. And one other thing worth noting is that they support Bluetooth 5.2 and they do have Wi-Fi 6E. Two pretty much specifications that I think are pretty important, especially for a handheld device. But how do all those specifications come together, and what's the performance like of that G3X chip, as well as what's it actually like using the Razer Edge for gaming? So to start off by answering that performance question, I did run a couple of synthetic benchmarks like Geekbench and 3D Mark. Now, I'm not an SoC expert and I don't have a ton of experience with this particular processor, but I did do a little bit of comparison between my Google Pixel 7 Pro, and in all the tests, the 7 Pro did outperform the Razer Edge, and that's to be expected as it is running a native G2 chip. But I do think that lower end SoC performance does translate over to real world performance. So I tested out 3 different gaming categories: cloud gaming, native Android titles, as well as a little bit of emulation. So when it came to cloud gaming, this is actually, I think, one of the stronger points of the Razer Edge. I tested out NVIDIA GeForce Now as well as Xbox Cloud Gaming Beta. Both of them worked pretty much flawlessly. I had no issues and I had really great input latency overall. And I'm definitely going to chalk that up to the fact that it does have a Wi-Fi 6E chip and I was connected to my Wi-Fi 6E access point. Native Android gaming, though, was a different story. I played a number of titles such as Dead Cells, Grand Theft Auto, Apex Mobile, and Diablo Immortal, and I was actually extremely disappointed with the performance. In all 4 of these titles, I ran into a number of issues where my device was either stuttering, or it was chugging along, or the frame rate would sort of drop and then speed up again. Now, to see that in something like Diablo Immortal or Apex Legends Mobile, which are much more demanding titles, I think that's to be expected. But in a game like Dead Cells, that's a 2D platformer, which can pretty much run on a potato. And when it comes to emulation performance, as always, it's a bit of a wild card. I generally like to stick to Game Boy and SNES games for my emulation, and I think it did, of course, a great job running those titles, but I was able to also slap on a couple of N64 and GameCube games, and it also did really well running on those titles as well. So overall, I think the Razer Edge does a pretty good job when it comes to emulation. I think one of the bigger issues with this device is the fact that the Razer Edge is made up of 2 different pieces of hardware. So number one, it is a Android tablet as well as a Razer Kishi V2 Pro. So this is basically one of those like similar game vice devices that you would slap on any Android title. In fact, actually I have a very similar device over here. This is the Razer Kishi V2, which pretty much looks identical except for 2 minor changes. One, the Pro has 2 extra cutouts on the left-hand side, presumably for stereo sound on the Android device. And then also, the Pro does have a 3.5mm headphone jack, but it is the year 2023, and Bluetooth headphones with low latency are definitely a thing. So overall, they're pretty much the exact same device, and it starts to beg the question, should you even consider a device like this versus slapping on one of these to your existing Android device and use that as your handheld device? But I digress back to this being a really weird design choice when it comes to the Razer Edge. One of the bigger issues that I have with this is the fact that it does have quite a bit of flex. Just making sure the camera can see it. Now, on one hand, I can understand why they did something like this, as not all Android titles do work with a controller, so it gives you the ability to then use the touchscreen or just use this as a touchscreen gaming device such as this. And also, if you are using any vertical games such as like Marvel Snap or maybe some of the other runner games, it gives you a little bit more versatility to use it as a traditional smartphone or something like that. However, I think the cons outweigh the pros of it being a device like this, and it really would have been nice to see more of a singular solid device very similar to the Logitech G Cloud. I think another really weird design choice is this display. Now, I think overall the colors and saturation, the display really looks good, but this thing has got bezels for days. Now, it's not a huge issue. It's not like a deal breaker. But as you can see, if you kind of look, you can see some of the UI elements are actually being cut off by the fact that this is a curved display. In a number of titles that I played, I noticed this, and it's basically a little bit of a nuisance. And I think in the year 2023, we could have definitely done a lot better, even if it increased the cost of the device by a little bit. But this particular display, I'm just not a huge fan of the big bezels, not a huge fan of the curved edges of the display as well. Another really weird design choice is the fact that this is an actively cooled device. Now, of course, I get it, right? Actively cooled is going to sustain higher clock speeds, presumably give you good performance, even though we're not really seeing the fruits of that labor. We've got perforations here at the bottom and the top, of course, to bring in cool air and export hot air. But I just think that the active cooling on this device is really loud. I'm just not a huge fan of this particular design. I get it. It's necessary if you want to sustain some of those higher clock speeds for longer and give you good performance, but I'm just not loving the implementation of active cooling on this. It would have been nice to see maybe a different type of cooler that was much more quieter. And if you've seen this camera, I mean, this thing is absolutely terrible. It screams Android camera meme. Now, aside from some of those weird hardware choices, which for me are definitely a deal breaker, I think the Razer Edge is solidly constructed. I think both the controller feels really good, the buttons are nice and clicky, the analog sticks do feel good. Of course, it feels familiar to me as I do have the Clicky V2, but also the tablet is really nicely constructed. Even though it is plastic, it feels like it's good quality. It does have stereo sound and USB-C charging, so I do think it is overall a really well-constructed device. I think the Razer Edge is a super niche device, and it is going to garner a fan base, albeit a very small fan base, but a fan base nonetheless. And those dozens of you out there are going to want a device like this for a couple of specific reasons. Maybe number one, you're only looking to spend around $400 on a dedicated handheld gaming device. You aren't interested in a Steam Deck, maybe because you think the Steam Deck is just too big and you want something that's really pocketable, or you can take it apart and use it as a regular smartphone. You're also not going to want to monopolize your regular smartphone and just slap a Razer Clicky on it, which would be a much more affordable option. But you are going to want that dedicated device like the Razer Edge. I don't know, man. I just can't do it. This thing sucks. I don't like it. I think there are so many other much better options out there in the market if you're looking for a dedicated Android device. You've got the Retroid 3 Plus, you've got other Ambernic and random Chinese brand handheld devices. You've also got the Logitech G Cloud, which also comes in at a much lower price tag and still performs better than this device, regardless of it having its G3X chip. I'm just not quite sure what Razer was thinking when they decided to design this device. It's a big waste of their time and R&D, my time, my money, and this thing is definitely going back to Razer as soon as I stop recording this video. And I'm a big fan of Razer. I've got Razer laptops, got their webcams, got keyboards, mouses. It's just, I don't know what happened here. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up because I've got to go catch FedEx and put this thing back in the box and send it back to Razer. So as always, if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. Also, if you like this video, hit the like button. And if it's your first time to the channel and you like this video, consider subscribing. Once again, guys, my name is Fran. Thanks for checking out this video. I'll see you guys in my next one.